Hi everyone!
Hey. Hello.
Thanks everybody for coming today. As you guys know, you signed up for the Engineering and Geoscientist Information Session Networking Club. I have Holly here. So she's from the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists. And so she's going to be talking a little bit about the process, just about what they do at the association and everything like that. I'm going to ask that you just keep your questions until the end, only because I'm recording this just for anybody that wasn't able to be here, and it'll just be easier to have the questions at the end. Any pressing things, just hold it until the end and Holly will answer. And then we have a special guest that's going to talk about his experience going through the process of becoming a professional engineer, getting certified here in New Brunswick once Holly's finished. I'm going to turn the lights off just because you can't really see the screen. So. Am I good at here, camera-wise? Should I? Yep. Perfect.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Holly. Thanks so much for coming out to the session. I'm really happy to see all you folks here. So I'm here today, like Sally mentioned, to talk about becoming licensed to practice in New Brunswick. So the first thing we're going to cover is just what APEGNB is. So it's the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of New Brunswick. So we are an association that's existed for over 100 years, since 1920. And we've been regulating engineering in the province for that whole time. And in the 90s, we also started regulating geoscience. We have over 6,000 professionals. This includes engineers, geoscientists, as well as engineers in training and geoscientists in training. And we are governed by the Engineering and Geoscience Professions Act. So what we do is we protect and serve the public. And we do this in a few different ways. One of which is that we license professionals to practice. So we ensure that the people who are practicing engineering and geoscience are qualified to do that. We also ensure that the people who are calling themselves engineers and who aren't engineers aren't allowed to do that. And we'll get into that a bit more, who's allowed to call themselves an engineer or geoscientist. We discipline people who make professional misconduct or who behave improperly in the profession. And we also set performance standards, so helping to set the bar for what's expected of an engineer or a geoscientist. Now, before we go any further, we use a lot of acronyms. So I wanted to go through them ahead of time just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the words that I'm going to be using and what they mean. So the first one that we have is APEGNB, which I've already mentioned. The second one is CEAB. So that is Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board. So CEAB is a group of people who assess Canadian schools to see the quality of their education in engineering. WES, or WEST, World Education Services. I'm sure that most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with that, having possibly done that for IRCC. It's a credential evaluator. The NPPE is the National Professional Practice Exam. So that's an exam that everybody has to write who wants to become licensed. ARCD is the Academic Requirement Completion Date. So that's a fancy way of saying the day that you're done your education and ready to start your work experience. And then we have the terms for the people who are members of the association. So we have members in training, which are made up of engineers in training and geoscientists in training. And we have PENG and PGO. So that's an abbreviation for professional engineer or professional geoscientist. So what does registration look like in New Brunswick? It can be a lengthy process, as Iro will probably tell you later. And it starts with an academic assessment. So it starts with your education being assessed by a committee of engineers and geoscientists. Somebody who specializes in the field that you specialize in will look at the education that you have, and they'll compare it to the education you would have received if you had gone to a CEAB accredited school. And they'll see if there are any gaps or any differences in the education that you have. Once you've gone through the academic assessment and completed any requirements, then you can move into the member and training program. So the member and training program is for those who are not quite ready, don't have all the qualifications to become a PN or a PGO, and we will go over those requirements. But for those who don't have everything that they need, you can still become a member of the association. You just can't be a full member yet, but you can still be a member in training. Keep in mind that becoming a member in training is optional. It's only something you have to do if you want to do it. But when we're talking about PN and PGO, that is mandatory. It's mandatory to get your PN or your PGO designation if you want to practice engineering or geoscience independently in New Brunswick. So what that means is that a lot of you may have come from experiences where you were able to practice without being registered, or maybe you were registered in another country or another jurisdiction. Here in New Brunswick, it is required, as well as across Canada, to be registered with us in order to practice independently. And that means stamping documents. Certain jobs will require having a PN or a PGO. Certain tasks that you may do will require having a PN or a PGO. So it's important to keep in mind that depending on the kind of work that you want to do, it's likely that you're going to want to be able to get this because you'll need it in order to proceed with your career. So I'm going to dive a little bit more into the academic assessment. So as I mentioned, it compares a non-CEAB accredited degree, so any degree that was obtained that's not already been evaluated by the Canadian board, and it compares it to the education you would have received if you had taken one of those accredited degrees. And the evaluator will do a line by line, and they'll check to make sure that it matches up. There may be gaps because education is different across the world. There may be things that you have that we don't ask for, or things that we ask for that you might not have. So when it comes to that, there are ways to fill those gaps so that you're able to keep going. So the most likely outcome is that you'd be assigned exams. It can be anywhere from 1 exam to 5 or more exams that you'll be assigned, most likely to confirm the knowledge that you have, as well as just to check and make sure that you have everything that you need to move forward in the process. There's also, for those of you who have 5 or more years of work experience, there may be the option to do an interview instead of exams. So that's also on the table. And some people will be asked to do courses. So if you have significant gaps, if you're missing a lot of content that you need, you may be asked to take some courses to fill those gaps. And you have to pass any requirements that are given to you before you can continue in the process. So whatever exams, interviews, or courses you're assigned, you have to get through that before you can move on. When it comes to how your work experience plays into the academic assessment process, they're looking at your education, and what they're going to do is they're going to determine an ARCD, so an academic requirement completion date. So they're going to determine the day that you completed all the knowledge that you needed to become an engineer or a geoscientist. So based on this day, you can start counting experience from then on. So some of the experience that you already have may not qualify to count toward the 48-month requirement that we're going to talk about later. This comes at the discretion of the committee. For most of you, it will probably be the day that you finished your bachelor's degree, but there is the possibility that it's later, and it is a possibility that it kind of impacts the amount of work experience that you can count. So I'm just going to go over a little bit about how to actually go through the process. It's a pretty straightforward process, but it is to start. But it is a bit lengthy once you get into it. So you just need to fill out an application form on our website, and then you email it to us. We need proof of Canadian citizenship, residency, or a work or study permit. So just whatever document you have. It does cost $181.13 to do the academic assessment. So there is a fee associated. We need a WES report. And if you have any Canadian schooling, so if you've gone to school here as well, we need those transcripts as well. So in terms of next steps, once you're past the academic assessment, that's probably the big question that you have is what happens then. So once you've gone through the academic assessment, you've applied, you've been evaluated, you've completed your requirements, then we start talking about whether you're going to become a member in training or a full member. And as I mentioned before, there's some differences in the requirements. So for either program, you have to be what's called academically qualified. So once you've passed your academic assessment, you're academically qualified. You also have to have English or French proficiency. So this can be demonstrated in a number of ways. Some of you may have already taken language tests. You can provide those results to us. Some of you may want to do an interview with us to prove your language skills. Some people will, throughout writing the exams, show their language skills. So there's a lot of different ways that this happens. And then again, you do have to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or if you're on a work or study permit. So just, again, whatever document that you have. And you have to be of good character. So this is kind of an interesting requirement. We don't necessarily have a judgment that we make of whether you're a good character or not. But what that means is that you're signing a document when you become a member that you're essentially saying, you know, if something goes wrong, I'll let the association know. If I get in trouble with the law, I'll let the association know. Things like that. So there's an expectation there that you will just be honest and be ethical with the association. Now, this is where it starts to differ between being a member in training and being a full member. So when we're talking about good character, we're also talking about law and ethics. So there is an exam that talks about the law and ethics of becoming an engineer or a geoscientist. It's called the NPPE. It's mandatory for anybody who's getting registered across Canada. And there's lots of study guides and lots of materials about it. You don't have to pass the NPPE to become a member in training. You just have to pass it if you're going to become a full member. So when you're ready to become a full member, that's when you write the exam. You also need 48 months of work experience. So 4 years of work experience. And up to 36 months or 3 years can be obtained internationally. So as long as it's after your ARCD date, you can start counting that experience that you had internationally or that you had here in Canada. And then you have to have at least 12 months of Canadian experience to apply for your professional designation. So when it comes time to apply, the big difference that we see is that most people have everything that they need except for the 12 months of Canadian experience. So that's why a lot of people do the member in training program. They'll do it while they're obtaining their 12 months of Canadian experience. And then once they have that, then they'll apply for their professional designation. And again, it's not mandatory to do the member in training program. It is optional, but we do really recommend it because you get to be a member of the association, you get to know other members in training and other full members. You get to hear about opportunities, get involved with the community. As well, you get to begin to track your experience. So when you're a member in training, you can start logging your work experience with us, and that'll make it easier when it comes time to apply for your professional designation, because you'll already have started doing the work that you need to do to apply. And so I just want to talk a little bit about titles. So these terms up here are actually protected by the association. So calling yourself an engineer or an engineer in training or a geoscientist or a geoscientist in training, those are titles that you can only call yourself if you're registered as one of those members. So you may have been an engineer previously or a geoscientist previously. In New Brunswick, it's only once you've done all of these things that you can then call yourself that. So that's kind of an important distinction because, as I mentioned at the beginning, APEGNB, one of the things that we do is we can essentially crack down on people who are using the term engineer or geoscientist improperly. So, for example, like we send out cease and desist letters to people who are calling themselves engineers if they're not actually engineers or geoscientists. So it's important to know what you're able to call yourself is based on whether you're registered with us. You can be a project manager, you can work in engineering, but in order to call yourself an engineer, you do have to be registered. You do have to meet these criteria. And like I said, it is mandatory to have your stamp to call yourself that. So just a bit of background there. I want to talk a bit about the kind of common mistakes that we see with the application form. So based on what kind of application you're making, you want to pay attention to the little colored dots on the application form. MIT only complete section 1, and if you're applying for PN or PGO, you only complete section 2. So when you go on the site and you apply for the academic assessment, you actually start by picking whether you want to apply for MIT or PGO or PN down the road. And then based on that, that's the section that you fill out. And there is a question on the form that asks if you've ever been disciplined. The context for this question is that we want to know if you've ever been punished when doing your job. If you've ever done something wrong that you got in trouble for. So when you're looking at that question, that's what that means. Because a lot of people will check yes, because they aren't sure and they want to, be upfront. But we're just looking to know if you've ever been in official trouble or formal trouble before, which I'm sure most, if not all of you, haven't been. So it's just important for me to clarify that question because we see a lot of people checking yes when that's not the case, and it can cause some problems for your application. So that's the application process. That's a little bit of background about what the different titles mean. This email address is always available, registration@apegnb.com. It's answered 5 days a week. If you have any questions, I'm here today, but if you want to write that down, if anything comes to you later, you can always email that as well, and somebody will get back to you and answer your questions. So that's everything that I had to share with my presentation, but happy to take questions, and just, yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry to blind you. No. When you mentioned the 12 months Canadian experience, is that like a specific in the engineering field that you would like to get registered as engineer?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
That's an important distinction. Thank you for clarifying. So it's 12 months of Canadian work experience in the area that you want to work in, so in engineering or in geoscience. And it's the same thing with the full 48 months of work experience. It has to be in engineering or in geoscience.
Okay.
How should we prove that experience?
So the 12 months of Canadian experience has to be done under the supervision of a PEng or a PGO. So somebody who's already registered with us has to be working with you or above you, and they'll sign off to say, yes, this person did this work. When it comes to validating your international experience, up to 36 months, that's can be a bit more of a lengthy process. We have to basically do a background check on your supervisor. So you need to be in touch with whoever your supervisor was, wherever you were working. And you'd put us in touch with them. We would do a background check on them, and then we would get them to sign off on your work experience.
One of the big challenges that we face is like we are newcomers. So when we keep applying for jobs, we find maybe it's difficult to get into a job which we can get a existing PE to supervisors. Maybe I will get a job as an AutoCAD technician, whereas I was working as a full engineer in some other place. Now, when I work as an AutoCAD technician or a rivet technician or technical sales of some really technical product, I am still doing a part of engineering. I am reviewing drawings, making drawings. But since I am working as a technician, maybe the person who is above me refuses to sign me off after 1 year. Then it's a dilemma for me because I already worked, and then I find no one is willing to certify me as an engineer.
So one thing that we do have is something called the mentor program.
Okay.
And it will actually pair you with a PEng or a PGO that works somewhere else entirely. And as long as you agree, your employer agrees, and the third party person agrees, that person who works somewhere else entirely can actually sign off on your work experience. So they basically, you tell them about what you're doing, you write logs, and you provide them to that third party engineer or geoscientist. And they review them and they say, yes, this person is doing good work, and then you'd be able to count the experience.
Okay, I want to extend my question. Now, maybe I get a job as a technical sales. I want to say because this is the kind of jobs that I think I'm getting closer to. So this will be like sales of material, but related to civil engineering. I'm a civil engineer. But really speaking, it's sales, but I need to know the materials only. I'm not doing real engineering. Will these kind of things be still counted by the person, third party, that yes, he is dealing in sales of, say, lumber, and he knows the sizes and how much load it can take, and he will sell it on that basis. Or say reinforcement bars, and he should know how much load or how much where it works, where does it work. So this is technical. It's not pure grocery items. Will this also be counted? Because I need to take decisions now whether I should accept the offer or say no because it doesn't help me in my future.
Yeah. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the person who makes that decision is another engineer or another civil engineer. It would be one of our volunteers would make that call. But generally speaking, management roles or sales roles or things like that that apply engineering or geoscience principles, those things can be considered because because you're still applying your knowledge, and we're not just looking for the hard technical skills. We're also looking for your communication skills, your teamwork skills, things like that are also evaluated when it comes time to apply for your PMG or PGO designation. So if you wanted to have like a specific conversation about your situation, I can get you my card afterwards and we can chat further. But generally speaking, you know, there is some flexibility in the type of work that you do, and as long as it's, you know, related to engineering, you're applying your knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, my question is regarding that 6 months outside the 12 months. Like in my country, Nigeria, we have a similar body, Nigerian Society of Engineers. They also require you to do 4 years before they can give you that designation as an engineer. So some of us who've gone through that process for many years, my supervisor, for instance, then, because we also have people that sign off, is late. So in this case, you're saying that you have to contact them and you have this correspondence between them and this. I'm asking if one can show a proof of membership, of professional membership in this country, having satisfied those conditions well over and years for now, can that also count as 3 years with proofs?
Yeah, as long as we have proof. Generally what we do is we get your old supervisor to sign off on your application form. But there is, again, some flexibility. We understand that there are circumstances where you're not able to get, you know, you're not able to get your old supervisor's signature, or like you said, you've already done it. If you have, you know, if you're registered somewhere that has a very similar structure to us, and we can get confirmation of that, we can talk to the other association and get their sign off, we can definitely count that towards the 3 years. Yeah.
They also have a website with your registration number. You can log, every person can log in and check the details there also.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would definitely be important to include with your application.
Okay.
I have another question.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the calling yourself engineer. So, for example, for overseas engineers, like we have our titles from another country, how should we put this in our resumes or CV? Are we able to say, like, for example, your professional profile? Well, I usually say I'm an environmental engineer. So, how would that should be put there?
Yeah. So there's a bit of a difference between calling yourself an engineer on your resume. Like, if you were an engineer in another country, then you were an engineer. That's correct to say that. That's not up to us to say that's not true. So you can definitely put on your resume like that you were an engineer in this place on these dates, because you were. The thing we don't want you to do is we don't want you to go to somebody and say, I'm an engineer and I'm going to do work for you because I'm an engineer. And I mean like clients. I don't mean like employers. Like if you're talking to an employer and you're saying, you know, I was an engineer, or like that's fine. We don't want you, you know, building somebody's house saying, oh, I'm an engineer, but you're not registered with us.
Fine.
So it's kind of more about the work that you're doing.
Like, as an independent, I guess, or like,
Yeah.
like on your own name doing with clients.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be with you and to participate in this event today. I am an immigrant mechanical engineer from another country. I was a member of the Order of Engineering there, and I am a student. So I participate in many projects in engineering, but many fields too. Software engineering, electrical engineering, I have too. So in this case, what's the best field to choose to be member of the association?
Yeah, so when you register as a PNG, you don't register in a discipline. It's expected that you'll know your scope. So it's expected that you know if you're in software or computer engineering, you know that you can't do civil projects, for example. But if there's some overlap, if your scope is very broad, which it sounds like it is, then it's okay to work in all those areas. As long as you know your own limits and you know what you're capable of doing and what is not in your knowledge area, then that's kind of up to you to determine what you're comfortable with, and we let you make that determination. So we don't register you in a discipline.
So I must contact you or another engineer to choose this field. Engineering, computer engineer or software engineer.
Yeah, you don't have to choose a field to get registered. In terms of deciding what you want to do with your career, it might be good to have a conversation with each type of engineer to kind of give you an idea of what you should do with your career, but you don't have to pick a field to be registered.
Thank you so much. And I have another question too, is for the name or the title, Professional Engineer. I am legally have the right to practice this career, but I am not with the association.
Yeah, so anybody can work in engineering, whether you're registered or not. But to do certain tasks, so for example, anything that requires stamping a document, that's when you have to be registered. So if you need a stamp to do it, you need to be registered. If you want to work on your own, you don't want to work for somebody else, then you need to be registered. If your boss tells you you need to be registered to do the tasks that you're being asked to do, then you need to be registered. But you can work in engineering as somebody with an engineering degree without being registered.
So in an interview, how can I introduce myself, or how can I?
Yeah, you can say that you
I
were.
am an engineer.
Yeah.
I am actually.
Yeah. It's okay to say that in an interview, as long as you're clear with them about the fact that you're not registered with us yet. So you were an engineer where you were working. That's totally okay to say. The important thing is just not to make it sound like you're registered here when you're not. Some people, believe it or not, will do that. They'll make it sound like they're registered with us and try to kind of make the process go a little quicker by saying they're already registered. As long as you're not doing that, you're not going to, get in trouble. As long as you're not claiming to be registered when you're not.
Because it's so important to eliminate those problems too.
Yeah, just to be upfront and just to be clear, yeah.
I just want to say, I think it's important just to disclose when you are interviewing or in an interview for an engineering position, just say, I'm not yet a part of either APEGNB or I'm just not a professional engineer, I'm still an EIT or a GIT. I would just disclose it.
What I used to say before becoming a professional engineer, I used to say, I'm graduated from a professional from an engineering program. So they know you're not a professional engineer, but you've got the skills.
Awesome.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
That's what I used to say.
graduated.
I'm a professional engineer.
No, what did you put in the CV when you were applying before you became a professional engineer? Graduated engineer?
I used to say I am graduated from an engineering program, from a biomedical engineering program. That's what I used to put in my resume.
Okay.
Back, so your employer, your potential employer, will know that you've got the skills as an engineer, but you don't have the title yet.
So regarding MIT, who provides training? So while being employed, can I be a MIT?
Yeah, so an MIT is somebody who's done their education but not done their work experience yet. So you get to be an MIT while you're doing your work experience.
That means I have a job.
Sorry?
I have to have a job, get a job.
You don't have to be employed to be an MIT. You can be, if you're currently unemployed, as long as you're done your bachelor's degree, then you can become an MIT. Most MITs are working, but you don't have to be employed to be an MIT.
If we get PN from this province, New Brunswick, is it valid for employers from other provinces that we can work with?
That's a great question.
Alberta or
Yeah, so there's an agreement between all the provinces and territories, all their associations. So once you get it here, you can transfer it very easily to other provinces. There's a bit of basically there's some paperwork that needs to happen to transfer to work in another province, but it's much quicker and you don't have to go through all of this again.
so we don't need to, for example, pass some courses or interviews.
So regarding the NBE, do you offer any courses to practice about it?
Yeah, so we have what's called the NPDE seminar. It's basically a prep course or a prep seminar where a prof who teaches law and ethics goes over everything you need to know with the group. So if you register to write the exam, you'll have access to the seminar.
Only this 4 hours I think in YouTube, I saw it before.
Oh, you
Yeah.
yeah.
The next question is about having degree from engineering program. Is there differences between bachelor, master, or PhD?
Yeah, so what we look for is a bachelor's in engineering or geoscience. If you have a bachelor's in a different field and a master's in engineering, that's still, you're still eligible. It just might be a little bit more complicated or take a little bit longer to get you where you need to be because there might be more gaps. So basically what they base it on is the bachelor's degree, but if you have kind of a non-standard education, you can still get there.
You mentioned before about the background check with the if your supervisor is overseas, like in regards to the professional experience. So does that supervisor that you will be contacting overseas kind to sign your experience needs to be certified in that country as well, or it has to have an engineering title as well, like an engineering background?
They have to be qualified to sign off on your work. What that means is very hard to define. So sometimes your supervisor may be registered with the association or the body where you were working. So if that's the case, that's really easy. We just check their certification. If they're not, it doesn't mean the work experience doesn't count. It just means we might have to get a copy of their education or their work history to know that they're qualified to sign off on the work experience.
Okay. And another question, sorry. I did check the application form and I noticed that you ask for 3 references. So do all of them need to be engineers as well, like engineers as personal references for your application, I guess?
One of them has to be a Canadian PN. So during your work experience, while you're gaining that 12 months, you want to be sure there's at least one person who can be a reference for you because you need that. The other 2 people can be from international work experience. You can have, as long as they're in engineering or in geoscience, so they can be international supervisors or international colleagues or things like that.
So, and you said, okay, 2 can be international,
Yeah.
if so, and 1 has to be a PN certified, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask a question. The chapter of Fredericton Engineers, how would they be able to join that?
So once they,
But first explain what it is to them so that they understand it.
so with membership in APEGNB, I mentioned that there was, you get to be part of the community. So there's chapters across the province. So there's a French branch, and each branch you can become involved with them. You can they do a lot of activities. They not necessarily engineering or geoscience related, but just social activities. One of the big things that's coming up is they're going to be hosting a haunted house for Halloween. So if you become a member with us or a member in training, you can join the branches and you can get involved with social activities and things like that with other engineers or geoscientists or members in training.
It's also a great place to network, to build your network of professionals within your field. And so if you go through this process, I strongly recommend that you join with them. The activities they do fun things, but you want to do fun things to get to know someone. It kind of breaks the ice and makes it easier. And the engineers I've worked with over the years that have done this, it's been very successful for them to link up with this branch of engineers, local branch.
In non-Canadian experience, how back you would go to search for the supervisor of a person? I mean 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, because sometimes some of them are retired, they may not respond. They may not respond to our request, and they may be too busy to answer someone officially. Sometimes they are simply retired, that's it. So maybe if 1 or 2 guys don't respond, you may go backward further. How long? Because I need to dig down to my old people, I don't know what they're doing now.
It needs to be signed off on in order to qualify. So we need somebody who is qualified to sign off on it, whether that's somebody you worked with, one of your supervisors, your boss's boss, somebody has to sign off on it. So we have to find somebody to make it admissible. But if we can't get a hold of one person, we'll try somebody else. So.
Okay, so there is no exact time limit. Maybe 3 years is sufficient.
You need 3 years of work experience.
Okay, that's sufficient.
But it can be
Okay.
from across your career.
Okay.
So 3 years of international work experience plus the
Okay.
Canadian. Yeah.
The boss of boss is also okay. Sometimes, I mean, maybe not my direct supervisor, but his boss or supervisor,
Yeah.
it's okay.
For assessment of the education, we should just go through the list, or you can do it by your own, and you provide some transcript and over syllabus.
It's strongly recommended that you provide a course-by-course WES report. It's not required. If you have official sealed transcripts, you can provide those instead. They do have to be certified, translated into English or French, but you can provide those. But we strongly recommend the WES report because it does a better job of giving us kind of equivalencies than just our volunteers trying to determine on their own versus the professionals at WES. So it's what we recommend, but you can just submit transcripts.
And another question, the 12 months of the experience for Canadian job work experience, it must be after applying for the page for assessment of the, or we can obtain this experience in before and then we apply for assessment and obtain the page.
So you can apply for your assessment at any point. You can do your 12 months of work experience, then apply for your assessment, and then apply for your PNG right away. You can apply for your assessment, do your 12 months of work experience, and then apply for your PNG. It's totally up to you.
Oh.
I'm gonna stop talking now because I'll come see you after. Because I really want Irwell to have a chance to answer some questions as well, because this is the guy you want to hear from more than me, I promise. Because he's actually actually been through the process, and he is now a PN. So he's where you're probably hoping to get to. So I really want you guys to have the chance to talk to him as well. So I'm gonna step aside.
My name is Ciro. I'm a biomedical engineer. I studied in Cuba, in the university in Cuba. I did a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Then I moved to Canada, and I wanted to become a professional engineer because, as most of you, I felt frustrated not being able to call myself an engineer, though I knew I had the skills. And I said, well, we understand that, but at the same time, we need to understand that there's rules in the countries that we move. We need to follow those rules, and as the public, who is our final goal to protect, we need, the institution is to be sure that the engineers, they meet all the requirements. So that's why we have to follow the rules and not call ourselves engineers. And I know sometimes kind of upsetting, but it's a really rewarding process, because then you realize that how ready you are and how capable you are to go to the process. So in order to become a professional engineer, I used 3 years of experience in Cuba in a research center. I had a really good supervisor over there, and he's a member of the IEEE, so he qualified as a supervisor, and also I got enrolled in a temporary job at UNB as a researcher. So all that experience come for me as a 4-year experience, and then I went through the experience interview. Is that correct? That was a challenging one, because it's not only about your knowledge and your skills, it's also about language. You need to make yourself clear that they need to understand you. Sometimes, because of the accent stuff, people can misunderstand. But that went well. And then finally, the National Professional Practice Exam, which is also a little bit challenging, but you just need to study and know how, the wording is the more complicated part, I would say. But it's, like I said, it's rewarding at the end. It's really rewarding, because that feeling comes back. It's really. I can share my email with all of you if you need make some questions or some guidance. I'm still fairly new, but probably in a year or so I could be overseeing people. I work for the hospital. I'm the manager for the medical device processing department. I'm planning to stay there for a while because I like what I do. Like I said, I'm willing to oversee more, potential candidates, because I feel that I need to help other people to become professional engineers. Because I've been there and I know how important it is. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, about how long this process took, like from the very beginning until now, like how long did that?
Okay, well, I came to Canada in 2019, so it's like 3 years now. But my country is very particular, because all the paperwork is super slow. We are very particular.
Not just yours.
All of us, don't worry. They are all the.
They have their own ways, and everything is very slow.
But you apply once you came here, or you apply?
I applied a year ago, I would say. But I was making sure that I knew all the requirements in advance, so I was working on that. Okay, I need my assessment done through West. I called to Cuba and I asked, to the institution and stuff, and I get all my paperwork through West. West is fairly fast. It's good. And then, as she said, as Holly said, because they give you such a good report, it's super quick in the association, the evaluation. And also, it took me a year to get the experience here in Canada, so, just think about a year.
experience.
If you take aside the fact that you don't need experience because you already have it, once you submit your documents, everything, how would you say, how much time will it take?
There is a committee for experience, and they meet every
6 to 8 weeks.
exactly. So depending on when you submit your application, and I know they've been busy lately, so sometimes it takes 6 weeks, or sometimes they do the second cycle, and then they will book. If they recommend you to get into an experience interview, which I was recommended to, they will book you that. So that usually takes like a couple of weeks more, or probably a month. And then when you pass that, if you're successful in your interview, they will recommend you to go through the National Professional Practice exam. And those happen every 4 months. It's only 4 times a year, 3 times a year, or 4 times a year?
4 times.
4 times a year. So as soon as you get that recommendation, my advice is to just go ahead and get yourself registered, because you know it's like a deadline there, and if you can make it, you won't have to wait then 3 months more. So it's a long process. I would say take you about a year, if I'm not, yeah, probably a year, I would say. But the good part is that you can be working from now on in all your requirements, and you can be working in your, in just getting all your documents ready, getting your experience, because it's a lot of requirements. So by the time you get ready, it'll probably be, 6 to 8 months. By the time you have all your requirements. So it's not that bad, to be honest.
I have a question. One of the challenges that for newcomers, this part of the 12 months experience, and you have mentioned earlier something about if you have a mentor with you while you are doing some maybe relatively not the same kind of the discipline, if I may say, do you have some kind of a list of the professional engineers who could act as a mentor? Would you be a mentor for one of our clients?
And I was offering myself to be a mentor for sure, but the idea, that idea about becoming part of the branch,
yeah.
because that will help you to create a network. So you will be probably meeting engineers close to your actual branch, you are in engineering, and they will be probably better mentors than me, you know what I mean? And they probably have a project for you to work on the side, probably on the side of your actual job. So that will come also as an experience. But I had missing a few months, and that's what I had to do with a company called Smart King. I don't know if you know about that company. So I was working for them, assembling drones and stuff. It's just electronic, but I was working on the side for the same company with a professional engineer, helping him with the design, helping him with the troubleshooting, helping him to improve the models and the assembly process. That's engineering work. So that few months helped me to go through the process.
So, for the chapter kind of the advice, you need to be a MIT in order to participate in. So do you advise in general that people should start being a MIT first? Yeah.
I would say so.
Okay.
I never went to the MIT process because I had experience. I mean, I was only a few months away from the experience, and I knew I could get it. And that's the thing. Once you get into the network with the other engineers, they will help you out. For sure. There is a good, supportive community here of engineers.
There's a follow-up question from me. What I understand from what she just said and what you answered, but if you already have experience, you don't need to register as a MIT. Is there any other way you can join the Association of Federated Engineers without being MIT?
Well,
So like, can you join the Fredericton branch without being a member?
Yes.
So you do have to be a member, so you have to start the process. If you were really looking to make those connections, as long as you've applied with us and gotten like an applicant number, for example, we can kind of help you, we can start making those connections for you. As long as you're kind of registered with us in some capacity, we can start to help out, yeah.
So I can say that though it says it's optional, the meat is optional, but it is highly recommended.
It helps, it actually helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, it's different when you go to apply for a job. It's different if you say, I'm graduated from an engineering program, then you say, I'm a member in training for the association. That means that you have lots of requirements.
Yes.
Not all of them except for the experience. You know, so the employer, of course, will look at you as a better candidate for that job.
Can I just say something? Because I've worked with engineers for a long time and helping them through this process. And my suggestion to you is to go download that application and start it today. Get working on it. The longer you wait, the longer it's going to take for you to get into your profession. Okay, so get that started. Create the network. Once you become a member, then or put your application in, then you become part of that group of engineers. And they share, people in this town share information freely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Really freely, very generous that way. And so many of our engineers, that's how they got the job for that 1 year of experience, was because they met other engineers and said, oh my gosh, we need someone with your background, you know, to kind of help us out. The other thing I want to say is this, is that the engineers of all the professions that I've come across, there's only one that's easier, and I think that's the barbers. Barbers and licensors, but the engineers have really, because they are used to traveling around the world, and they are recognized around the world for their credentials. They recognize credentials from other parts of the world. So and they've really worked their system really well. And so they've removed a lot of the bugs, you know, because if you want to become a doctor here, it's going to take you a long time. If you want to become a pharmacist here, it's going to take a long time. If you want to be an engineer, we'll see you working in a year's time, you know, if you meet all those criteria. And so do not delay, because the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take for you to get back into your profession.
It is true.
Okay?
Like I said, it's just.
I have a question. So I came late, sorry for coming late, so I didn't start with you. Just when I came to start for questions, but I have a question just to ask. Sometimes somebody, they ask that question that I want to ask.
Yeah.
So it's for only for engineer came from other countries, or just to start, or just to apply? So
I don't understand it.
It's for all engineers, Canadian born.
Yeah. Say your question again.
So I'm asking that questions like who is able just to apply?
For APEG,
Yeah.
or to become a professional engineer?
Yeah.
So it's Canadians, or it's anybody internationally trained and educated. What you need is a Bachelor of Engineering.
Yeah.
So whether it's in another country or if it's in here in Canada.
It is mandatory that you have to work 4 years as an engineer to be able to get your PENG. But that goes for graduating students from Canadian schools right now. So all Canadians have to meet this criteria, but so do newcomers. But the wonderful thing is you can take 3 years that you've had prior to coming to Canada that could qualify, but that 4th year has to be in Canada. Okay? And I used to think, I'll just say this last thing, the first time I had someone come from the APENG group, I believed that you could not work as an engineer until you got through the 4 years or through all this process. And it took her coming and visiting us 3 times till we heard it, that you can work as an engineer, you just can't work as a a professional engineer with a stamp. You have to work as a junior engineer, and if I understand you right, you have to be in the process of getting your application, you have to make that application, is that correct? Become a junior engineer?
You don't have to be in the process, no.
No? So you could just, okay, so,
You can work as an engineer, you can do engineering work, but you can't call yourself an
yeah, you can't
engineer.
call an engineer and you don't have a stamp. And the
there's
stamp
certain-
is most important.
There are certain jobs, for example, for the government, you can't do it without this stamp because our final goal is protect the public.
Exactly.
So if the person who calls themselves an engineer, but is not registered, we don't know if that person meets the requirements, the Canadian requirements, the Canadian standard, and somebody gets harmed, the public gets harmed because, I mean, yeah, in your country you meet the requirements, but not in Canada. So that's, but you still can do engineering job, work, but you need somebody to oversee your work.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Be good for you to watch the video in the post.
I have a question. My question is, how can I accelerate the process because I don't have and I started the process with the association, but how can I accelerate it? Is the volunteering or training in engineering help?
Yeah, so the best way to accelerate the process, in my experience, is just to get the documents turned around as quickly as possible. So whenever something's requested, just send it in as quickly as possible because we get a lot of applications every day. And so you don't want yours to kind of end up at the bottom of the queue. And then in terms of just keep working and keep gaining experience so that you have enough when it comes time to apply.
Yeah, it's just like get enrolled and start the application.
Okay.
So I have a question. So when the person becomes the MIT, okay, he might finish, he might go for pre-engineering, but he still take time, maybe 1 year or 2 years. This MIT is need to register or is a lifetime?
Like how long can you be in the MIT program?
Yes.
5 years.
Okay.
And do you have to pay continuous years? Okay, is it the
There is a
181?
fee there.
We just bumped it up. It used to be 172.50. I think it's 180 something now.
Okay, so that's an annual.
Yeah, so there
It's
is
like
an annual
a-
fee.
Yeah.
And you have to do that anyway if you're a professional
Yeah, if you're a
engineer.
professional, I mean, that's actually more than that.
It's more than that.
expensive, yeah.
But just to be a part of the association,
But it's-
there is a fee membership.
Yeah,
Or a fee associated with the membership.
but being part of the association is really important. The networking is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so even if you get your PN,
You'll still have
you have to pay like an annual fee.
An annual
Now,
fee.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just to keep your license.
Of
you know,
course.
it's-
Yeah. And again, all the perks and
Yeah.
bells and whistles.
and
Yeah.
that's part of the reason because the association is self-regulated, you know.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's, engineers have a ring, right?
Yeah, we have a ring.
Yeah.
Well, if you are graduated from a program in Canada, I don't have a ring. This
Yeah.
is my opinion. But next year, I will be able to apply for my ring.
Yeah.
In June? No, in April,
Do you have to be a part of the association for 1 year?
for 1 year,
For 1 year.
to apply for my ring.
You should go find out what that ring is made out of. It's something to remind engineers never for this to happen again.
The bridge,
Yeah,
yeah.
go look it up. I'm not gonna tell you why. Go look it up because it's really an interesting story.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give you a clue. I know why, but it's just a bridge. But it's when you become a member trained, you can apply for the ring. It's just that I skipped that process.
Oh.
I went directly to professional engineering, and I don't have my ring, but I'll get it next year.
When you come EIT, you can take the.
You can apply for the ring, yeah.
One more thing that I would like to add, we here at the MCAF, we provide a microloan for people with regulated professions like yourselves. If you would like to have a microloan to cover the training or courses that needed by the association down the road. So yeah, we are here to help you with that. It's called AICLF loan. You can find it in the website of the MCAF.
Are there any more questions for our guests, Holly and? Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm late here.
No, that's okay. We are recording it, so I can send it to you after too. But go ahead.
See, I did my Polytechnic Diploma in Mechanical Engineering. It's a trade study. How this program is going to help me?
So, can you say that? Can you say that again? Sorry.
I'm a Polytechnic, a Diploma Mechanical Engineering. I did back in India. How this program is going to help me?
Okay, it's an engineering program or a technology program?
It's a mechanical.
This
It's engineering, but polytechnic.
Polytechnic, it's a diploma. It's not a bachelor degree.
It's not a bachelor degree.
It's
You
not
can be a
bad.
technologist technician.
It's, in order to become a professional engineer, the main requirement is being graduated from a bachelor's program for an engineering program.
So in your case, might be recommended that you take some additional courses before you're able to get to your PN. So you would kind of do the assessment and then get an idea of what the next steps would be required. If you want to become a PN, which depending on your career goals, whether you would rather be like a technologist or a technician, but if you do want to go for your PN, then you would be able to kind of go through the process and get an idea of where the gaps are.
So what kind of assessment I need to be taking?
So it's an assessment that we do at the association. You can go on the website and find the details of it, but basically you just send us your education and then we let you know what you're missing.
So am I eligible? I'm under work permit. Am I eligible to do a higher education?
Yeah, so you can have, whether you're here on work permit or PR or anything like that, you can apply to be assessed by the association.
Under the same association for the regulated trades, maybe just like what he's having, do you also provide this kind of regulations for regulated trades for maybe mechanical technicians or?
There is an organization called NB Set. They take care of technicians and technologists.
Technology, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay. So that is another regulatory body that you need to communicate with if you would like to proceed as a regulated trade in the technical or mechanical kind of the diploma that you have.
So MCAF will help me to do this.
The MCAF also will help with the expenses, if any. Yeah. But yes, for sure, I can help you with to connect you with the regulatory body for these regulated trades.
And we can connect you with what was it called?
MBSET?
MBSET. We can connect you with the association.
As far as I know, MBSET is only for electronics, but we can
No,
just...
it's technologies and technicians.
Is it technology
Yeah,
and
it's a whole
technicians in
list of
general?
them. They even now have the word engineer that they can use. The
Oh,
engineer,
really?
technician. Yeah, they just qualify for it.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
they just did, so. It's good. But if it's a 2-year program or a 3-year program, more than likely you're a technician, technologist.
It's a 3-year
That's
program.
good, yeah.
Yeah, do we have any more questions for our guests? And I know all of you have my email, because I send out a lot of emails. If you have any further questions when you leave here today, or anything like that, I'm sure that I can connect you with both individuals to answer any of the other questions that you may have that you weren't able to answer today. And I think Holly has some business cards that you can take. Holly, you can actually leave them here by
Oh,
the door
okay,
and then
yeah.
just grab one on your way out. To conclude the session, thank you all for coming today. Thank you all for being interested and asking questions and listening to our guests speak. The only thing I ask is that if you didn't sign the sign-in form or didn't check next to your name, just look at the sign-up sheet before you